Welcome, everyone, to Cycle Jerks Podcast, episode 124. I'm your host, Mike Stewart, and I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Dave Dalton. Welcome, Dave.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm always
Yeah.
on pins and needles as to what my description is going to be for.
Well, I say as always, and then last week you weren't here, so maybe it's not as always, but he's back this week. Okay, and then today we have a very special guest, mountain bike pioneer and frame builder for more like 30 years, and one of
44
years. Oh my gosh.
He's good with bikes, but he sucks at math. So sorry, Steve.
Yeah. But Steve Potts is joining us today on the podcast. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes. Well, Steve, you have a great history in mountain biking, and we always kind of like to start at the very beginning. And can you kind of speak to when you first got started with bicycles and how it all began?
Yeah, well, okay, so how it began for me, bicycles. I was the youngest of five kids, and we lived in Tamalpais Valley, which is the base of Mount Tam. And when I was 8 years old, my mom passed away, and I became kind of a latchkey kid. And the bicycle was my refuge. Basically, I didn't have a bicycle, but my brother had a big paperboy bike that weighed quite a bit and was way too big for me. But as I got a little older, I would go adventuring on bikes, and I just loved it. It gave me a sense of freedom and a sense of wonder out there. I was always into the history, and we lived in an area where there was obviously cowboys, ranchers, Indians. There's the Miwok tribe out there, and so I always dreamed of those things as a little kid. Kind of adventures and where people would live, and I liked fishing, and I liked the creeks and camping and all that stuff. So the bicycle was basically a tool for me to go out and explore, which eventually led me to exploring Mount Tamalpais when I was a kid, and it was just a great feeling. That's kind of the long and short of it. And then taking it a step further, when I got to high school, I started, I didn't have a car or anything, but I would pay my buddies a little bit of gas money. We go to the junkyard and we buy junk bikes. There was always a pile of bikes at the junkyard, and a cool bike would, an old paperboy bike like a Colson or a Schwinn or Excelsior would be like 25 cents. And if you found one in really, really good shape, you'd pay 35 cents. And that was a big deal. So I'd bring them back to our little high school machine shop, and I'd, weld it up, fix it, brace it, throw old pipe, parts on it and make it a bike. And that's kind of how that started. And then I'd say how I started my career was basically riding on Mount Tam and fixing up, I called them junkyard bikes. And I was pretty good at it. And I made a bunch of my friends' junkyard bikes. And then I started building bikes out of my own. Well, it didn't start that way. Joe Breeze and I grew up together. I don't know if you know Joe Breeze, but he's a pretty influential.
Heard of him? Just heard of him.
Anyway,
you big name dropper. You.
Well, we grew up together in the same town. Well, actually, he lived in Mill Valley and I lived in Tamalpais Valley, so a little ways apart. And his father and my father, ironically, when I was a little tiny kid, they built telescopes together. They, hand ground the mirrors, and they did all this incredible work. They were just brilliant. My dad and Joe Breeze's father were just really wonderful, bright men. And so that relationship with Joe kind of grew, and we didn't hang out. I never really hung out with anybody in school. I was always working or windsurfing or playing baseball or riding motorcycles. And I started racing when I was 14 in AMA racing, and then I turned pro when I was 17, and I continued my racing career for quite a few years. But anyway, Joe and I decided to go to New Zealand in 79 or 80 on our bicycles, and I'd helped Joe build his his second batch of bikes. He built a batch of 10 bikes at first, and then he built another additional 25, and I helped him with that. And one of those bikes was mine that we built, and we both went to New Zealand for, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks, and we circumnavigated both islands of New Zealand, and we bushwhacked, and it was an adventure of a lifetime. And I was one of the best trips I ever took, and Joe was just a trooper. He was super organized and had the maps and the compass and the whole thing, and it was quite an adventure. And when I was over there, I decided that I was going to make building bikes my living. And so when I
Huh.
came back, I sold literally everything I owned, and I rented a little 2-car garage for $35 a month. And I slept in it. I lived in it. Only had a water faucet, an old wall standing dial-up phone, rotary dial phone, a kerosene heater, and then I used the Schwinn shop down the road to use the bathroom. So it was kind of a pretty rustic way to life. But I was a kid. I was young,
Yeah.
young man,
Hey,
and
I think that's kind of really nice of you. I mean, because cyclists just tend to pee anywhere, right? So the fact
yeah.
that
No, I kept it together.
yeah,
Anyway, I did that for well, I did that for quite a few years, and then basically building bikes. And I didn't even think anybody'd buy the bikes. It was just, it wasn't, I built them and I hung them up in my rafters. And I remember the day I sold my first bike, I was in utter shock. I think it was $400 or $325 or something for the frame. I mean, it was a different day. I mean, let's
Sure.
face it, inflation's kind
that
of bitten us lately, but
that paid
anyway,
for
so
a lot of rent, right? $35
that
a
was,
month.
oh
You
my
said.
gosh, that was a lot of rent.
Yeah.
And then burritos were $2 in those days, so it was pretty good. But anyway, long and short of it, my relationship with Charlie Cunningham and Mark Slate, we all rode together, and when we were younger, and we started making parts together. We started making hubs, and we started making Charlie's roller cam brake, and then Charlie designed the Type 2 fork, and I kind of took that to another level, and we started building things and helping each other out. And then other builders said, "Hey, can you make a couple extra pair of hubs?" And so it kind of evolved from there. And then it turned into, quite a big deal. And we started designing tires for Specialized and bikes for Trek and Finish Line, Bell Sports. I mean, we just got really involved. And and then here I am today. I'm 200 years old and I'm still building bikes. And I just
So,
really enjoy it, inventing things. So
Yeah.
so
I really enjoy it.
I,
Yeah.
I got a couple of questions, and I maybe one is not a question, but maybe I'm just getting a bit philosophical. But it's when I was reading your background on it, I found it amazing that this amazing career, right? So building bikes, frame building, you know, ultimately WTB or wilderness trail bikes and all that. And it all kind of started, if you will, with a machine shop in high school, right?
Yeah.
And I can't. I'm maybe I'm just being philosophical here, but I just think it's such a I won't even swear, but well, a damn shame that there aren't those type of things in high schools these days. I was donating parts to a charity bike organization yesterday, and there's all these guys, and they're desperate for bike mechanics, right? And I'm like, because they don't teach this shit in high school anymore, right? Everyone's got to
Yeah.
on to college, or everyone's got to go on to learning how to code or do something like that. And it's like amazing you're able to follow a passion that
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong,
Well,
this started because your high school had a program like that.
well, yeah, and I want to add to that too. Charlie Cunningham also went to the school I went to, and the school I went to was one of the premier. If you if you took the school I went to, it was Tamalpais High School, and if you had it right now, it would be one of the best trade schools in the country. It had machine shop, wood shop. I'm not talking like little. Wood shop, machine shop, metal shop, auto shop, print shop, ceramics, jewelry, printing. The list went on. And when I was a little older, I went to they had an auction when they sold off all the shops. I was literally almost in tears just watching this heritage and this training go away because you're right. They don't do it. Everything's virtual. And I mean, people have a struggle with just regular relationships. I mean, I tell people when we were kids, we went outside, we played until we dropped. We were so exhausted. It was
Yeah.
stay out and come back before dark for dinner. And and the reality is as kids, we actually went outside and we played with our buddies. We got into scrapes, we had disagreements, but I remember the first time I got in a scuffle with one of my best buddies, I felt so bad. We talked through it. I mean, I was a kid. I was a little kid. I remember, wow, I don't like that. That's not, we got to patch this up. And we continue to be really good friends. But the reason I'm bringing this up is if you don't have a physical relationship with people and tools and how things are made and where food comes from, you just can't get it. You can't get it through the internet. And I notice that people can be very shrewd to each other on the internet, but when you're in person, you actually feel what's going on and you understand that what you say means something and it can hurt people and et cetera. But that's just a whole nother subject. But going back to the machine shop, we have lost touch with how things are made, where they come from, what it takes to build a community or a country. And it's just, for youngsters now, it's all in front of them right now. They've got everything and they really have no idea where it came from or what
well
hard work went into making things. So
and at the end of the day, not every kid is cut out for college, right? So not every kid is cut out for going to 2 or 4 year school. So and plumbers, electricians, welders. I mean, these are all noble professions, and for some reason, our schools don't want to teach this shit. It's frustrating.
And all the good carpenters, craftsmen, plumbers, electricians where I live are working around the clock. You're lucky if you can get an appointment, and they've got skills. And it's really important to have. It's really important to have.
Yeah. So
it's unfortunate with the that was always referred to as electives. You had the courses that you had to take, and then you had the electives, and the electives were always the fun thing. And I remember I took drafting, I took auto shop, I took ceramics, and it's a way for a young person to really kind of figure out, like to Dave's point, not everybody's cut out for college. Not saying that if you're into ceramics or into auto, it doesn't mean you can't go to college, but it's just like some kids are just not wired for that. So, but you can find a lane of something, whether creative path or skill set, and it really kind of help you try to figure out who you are and what makes your motor run, so to speak,
Well, I think the educational system has a lot to, there's a lot of things that are lacking. I mean, we don't teach a financial responsibility course in schools, which is really
still
important.
Haunting me today.
Well, damn it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So anyway, those are all secrets, but no, it's I think having some tactile skills is really, really good.
Agreed. So,
all right.
hang on.
Go ahead.
Hang on. I got a question about this motorcycle racing. So, so back in you raced motorcycle. Now, was it flat track? Is that right?
Well, I did everything. I started as a kid, just of course, riding in the hills, and I did start out. It was AMA racing, so you could do everything: motocross, hare scrambles, short track TTs, all of that. And I did all of that. I raced motocross, I raced everything, and then as I kind of grew in the sport, I always did a lot of cow trailing. I loved that, just riding in the woods. But I got into flat track, and then when I turned pro, I turned to Class C Pro, which is the miles, half miles, indoor short tracks, and it's pretty intense, put it that way. But I loved it. It's I just loved it. It was a way for me to improve my skills and test myself, and just stay on top of it. And the group of guys I raced with were really great. They were healthy. They, nobody was out just, doing drugs and all that. When I was a junior in high school, I was racing around the country, and a lot of my friends were just partying, which is fine. I'm sure that's what you do at that age. I'm not saying it's bad, but I just didn't see it. I had so much, I don't know. I kind of had everything I needed, really. It was quite a challenge, and and it was scary too. I mean, it's a high consequence sport,
For sure.
Um,
Yeah,
I've seen my share of tragedy.
I
So,
grew up racing BMX, and I was on this team, and we had this guy, Randy Tompkins, out of Fresno, and they put on a big race down there. And Randy was a flat track motorcycle racer, and we ended up staying at his house for this big national that was happening in Fresno. And he on Friday night he was a flat track, circle track. It was circle track or flat track. But I had
flat
never
track is-
seen
yeah, it's
I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. I was just a young kid, and these guys are sliding sideways all the way through the corners and wheeling down the straightaway and then sliding sideways through the corners. And I was just like, I was just blown away. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
well,
But
and they're inches from each other.
oh yeah, just packed in there, really tight. And but my parents, they squashed it right away. I was just like, I want to do that, and they're just like, yeah, nope. So my folks were not into motorcycles at all, and BMX was crazy to them, So, but yeah, they kind of squashed it. But I love the sport. It was such an exciting spectator sport, and I can imagine competing on that in that type of action. It must be invigorating.
Well, it's it's sort of been proven. I mean, as we learn more about our bodies and how we operate and the biology of our bodies, it's been proven that like events like sports like bicycling, or motorcycle racing, or any sport that's got risk involved and a lot of calculations. There's a lot of math going on. There's a lot of calculations going on in your brain, but your brain and your muscles release different chemicals in your body that actually keep you healthy. I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a biologist or anything, but the things that I've read is that it's really essential for the human to be active and to do these things. And it's I still ride today. I ride my bike every day, and I ride my motorcycle pretty regularly, and I take these adventure trips that are basically all on back roads. It's pretty cool. I went to I went up to Canada twice this last year during the summer, mostly on dirt roads, not all of it, but you have these maps that you can get. You can travel a lot on dirt roads, and I like being outdoors, and I like being in the mountains, and all that. It just changes your whole aspect of life and your perspective. Yeah.
So hold that for a thought, honey. Did you hear that? I need to ride my bike more. It's healthy. There you go.
There you go. It is.
Yeah. It is amazing. I've been just enamored with the sky lately, right? And so like on these rides, I do these really early morning rides, and the cloud formations and the sunrise and all this stuff, all this beauty that's just happening every single day. And so many people don't see it. They just don't even. They're not out at 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, or these odd hours. And it's an amazing world that we live in, and it's the more that you can experience it firsthand, the better off you're going to be as a human being. I think. I think.
I never get tired of it.
Me either. Yeah. And
I know it's crazy when I do those early morning gravel rides out to, when I'm riding to Livermore, and I sit there and I stop and I take the same freaking picture every day of a sunrise or the clouds, and I post it, and people must be sick of it, but every day it just strikes me a little bit different, and I'm not even a Nat Geo guy, but you're out there by yourself and you look and you go, this is freaking amazing. I start snapping pictures. So
well,
I'm sorry. One of the reasons I got involved in cycling is, or that it really hit me hard to make a vocation, was when you're riding about, like when I went to New Zealand with Joe, you're completely vulnerable and you're exposed, and you get to see things and meet people that you would just drive by otherwise. And it does really make you feel more connected. You just hard to believe. It's like, I can't believe I'm here. And it's a pretty healthy aspect of the whole outdoor, cycling and sports.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what keeps
So,
us coming back.
so, so let's get on to that a second. So now Joe Brees. So I'm assuming this was was this the whole Gary Fisher, Tom Ritchie connection, or was it just you and Joe? Or
No. Well, okay. So, well, there was a group of people doing things similar times. I mean, I grew up with Gary Fisher and Charlie Kelly and Tom Ritchie. I've known for years.
Yeah.
Super hard worker, very innovative, but it was not one person. It was, I'd say, I mean, there was people other places too doing similar things in Crested Butte, but they weren't doing it on the level that sort of the Marin County Bay Area guys were doing. And I think part of that was, I mean, I know for Joe and I know for myself, um, my father made everything. I mean, we grew up kind of average family, didn't have a lot of resources. And my dad would make everything. He'd make everything.
Uh-huh.
And he
made
was
freaking
very
telescopes. He made telescopes.
telescopes, sailplanes, gliders, violins. He was a watchmaker. I mean, he
Wow.
just made everything. And so I sat on a little bucket watching him do this in the garage. And Joe did too. Joe's dad had a nice machine shop and he watched his father making things. And I noticed that with my two sons. They both are very capable. Like they'll make anything. It's like they just kill me. My son Brennan, who's now a heavy equipment firefighter, my oldest son's a mechanical engineer. One weekend, my son Brennan, and I mill lumber too. I'm a sawyer. I've got mills and all. I just can't leave things alone. And he goes, Dad, let's make a flat, a flatbed for my truck. Well, it was Friday afternoon. We milled the lumber for it. He went to the steel fabrication place that was nearby, and he got a couple sheets of metal. And Sunday night, he drove away with the thing on, installed, wired, painted. And I remember he was kind of hassling me a little bit because I gave him help with it. And he's going, Dad, just tack it. We're not building bicycles. That's square. Come on, let's go. And but he saw it, and I'd see him do things. I'm going, where did he learn that? And it was through osmosis. He was watching.
Right.
He would tighten something together with an inner tube. That was sort of the ultimate clamp. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think what happened in Marin County is you had a lot of people that were hardworking and they had the resources. There was the high school machine shop. There was a lot of really cool things that where the tools were available and the energy was there. Not to mention all the magical things that happen when you go riding on the mountain or go on some, adventure is you've got the beauty of the area that you were born into. So there's all these little things that kind of add to it that make things happen. And then there's the collaboration between all the different people, all these different kind of cyclists, all the group that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of how it happens. It's just the energy that, we didn't think this thing would ever go anywhere. All we cared about was going for a ride with my fishing rod on the back of my bike, and if I could buy a $2 burrito after the ride. I mean, I wasn't going, oh, this is going to be great. I just thought this is really cool, and I can't tell you how much fun it is, and for me, it was good training for my racing on both, bicycle racing and motorcycle racing.
For sure.
So it was just a great place to be, I was into everything, windsurfing. And I was just active, super active. And,
Well,
I try to stay that way.
we
So
had
now
Char-
your
Char-
tool. Go ahead.
we had Charlie on, Charlie Kelly on a couple weeks back, and he kind of, you guys' stories kind of, you're right, obviously in the same group. Charlie's thing was like putting on the race and building, being kind of a hub for the bike builds with Gary and then Joe. And I think Charlie, he said that he gave Joe a deposit that got him to buy the tubes after a bunch of time of trying to get him to build a bike. When did you first start building? What was your first frame? Like you said, you sold your first frame. Were you putting serial numbers on those early ones, or were you just
No, I did. I did put serial numbers on. Yeah.
Okay.
And I did, and I had two serial number of books that got lost in a flood, or I got flooded out once. I mean, there was about 1.5 feet of water in the shop. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
but I still have all my other old books. They're just, I remember I had to write smaller and smaller because I was running out of the book, but I made quite a few bikes.
Yeah. When what was the first
So
one when you sold the first one? What year was that, would you say?
Okay, the first bike I made I didn't sell.
Okay.
I did it with a family friend, John O'Connor, who is his two sons and his daughter and I all grew up together, and he owned a sheet metal shop. And I want to say this because I think it was about 11 or 12, he asked me if I wanted a job, sweeping floors and cleaning up around the shop. And I immediately, did that, and I started soldering and doing this and that. And then he hired me, and then I became a sheet metal worker, which was really good in my skills as far as making things. And I learned layout work and copper work and stainless work and welding. And John offered me the business when I was older, but I was bent on building bikes. But I became I might have been the youngest sheet metal contractor in California. I was 23 when I got my license, and I started a
Wow.
business where I made stuff. So I made that bike with John. John was older. John just passed away 3 months ago.
Oh,
And
sorry.
he's known me since I was a kid. And he was 97. And I got some cool pictures. I can send them to you. But I made that
Yeah.
first bike with John. And and he did it in the shop, and we had fun. And that was the first bike I made. And I had my friend Dave Sigmund make a beautiful head badge for it. And I have that bike now.
Oh,
And
wow.
wow.
so that was my first bike. And then honestly, then the next bike, the first bike that I sold, I can't even remember who it was. The guy came in, and I was such shock. I was just in such shock when he bought
Yeah.
a bike. But I did everything. I worked in this little 2-car garage, and I cranked bikes out and little parts, and I painted them in the shop. I made a little spray booth, and I did everything. I made the head plates. I did I did everything. It was pretty wild.
I love the head
So
badge that you use.
Okay, well, that was the second one that we did, and that's another story. So,
Mhm.
you got to send us a picture of that first one. I'd love to see that if you
okay,
still
Yeah.
have it. And with all sincerity, I'd love to see that.
okay,
All right, so help me here. You're tooling around New Zealand with Joe
uh-huh,
Breeze,
yeah,
and you have this epiphany that you want to build bikes. I'm trying to figure
right,
out. So if I guess if I was tooling around New Zealand, or if I was a skier and went like from place to place to go skiing, I'd say I want to be a ski bum. I wouldn't necessarily say I want to build skis, right? I'd be like, hey, I love this lifestyle. So where, the lifestyle of being a bike bum, where was the transition? And not like, Joe, we got to get back because I got to go build frames.
well, no, well, okay. So what happened to me is I love to make things.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably a couple things. I was super shy as a kid. I mean, I was outgoing physically, but shy. And so if I had a way of expressing myself to somebody, I'd make them a present. I'd like make a flower pot, or I'd make something.
Okay.
I'd make a pocket knife and inlay it with abalone shell or copper or something. Anyway, that was my
Wow.
that was my that
I
was my
feel so
language.
insignificant.
I
Yeah.
no, but I was that was my language. I couldn't stop making things. Um,
Okay.
I played drums my whole life, and they wouldn't let me in. They wouldn't let me into the band unless I took private piano lessons, and we couldn't afford that. And so I said, well, I'm going to take drum lessons in school. I was just determined. So at, I don't know, I was 10 years old, maybe 10 years old, in my dad's shop, I made my own drum.
Oh,
And this
wow.
is a hysterical story. I used the banister to wrap it around, and then when I put the drum together, I hadn't quite thought it out quickly, but it was around the banister, and so we had to remove the banister to get the drum off. So, my thinking was, I'm going to get there, and I don't know how, but I'm going to get there. But anyway, long and short of it, I made this drum. I did everything. I skinned it. I made a rim for it. I even made my own drumsticks. And the music teacher, Todd Fleming, said, "You're in." So
Yeah.
that was my beginning. So I just had this, I was just kind of, that's the way I was wired. I was wired to make stuff and to invent things. And I guess it's a language, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if somebody has something they need fixed in town, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, it just
Yeah.
feels good to help people and do things, and you're not on the clock. And
Right.
so, I mean, I just
So
finished milling. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to talk about ask you about the business today. So um from those early years where it was all in steel and looking at your site now, it seems like everything's titanium. Do you still offer steel?
Well, I do still occasionally make steel, but it's hard to mix the two materials in one
Mhm.
shop because one's a little messier than the other. And I transitioned to titanium just because it's absolutely wonderful material. And I grew up on the coast, so I knew what the salt water and the salt air would do to steel. Steel, by the way, is an amazing material.
Yeah.
It's just vulnerable to oxidation. And so when I learned about titanium, I mean, it was like a no brainer for me, and it's so strong. And there's another thing about titanium that's really appealing is you can fudge and grind and repair steel or other materials, but when it comes to titanium, you get one shot at it. It's either right or it's not. You can't let go. Okay, well, we didn't purge it correctly. Let's just re-weld it. You can't do that. I like the fact that it's got a boundary and you got to stay in that boundary. And it's,
Mhm.
everything's ultrasonically cleaned, and I have a stainless welding bench and it's all wiped down and cleaned. And then, you've got your clean cotton gloves and all your rod is clean and everything. It's just got to be clean. And it's got to be purged correctly. It's got to have the right heat. So you've got all these things going on that have to be right. And
Mhm.
so I guess the level of satisfaction is pretty high when you finally get it,
Yeah.
So it's a demanding material. It's hard to work with, but it's very rewarding because it's a lifetime bike. It doesn't rust. It doesn't, if you build them correctly, they last forever.
Mhm. And
I
but
remember
So with
when
that much precision, then it's got to make like a knock on some of the titanium manufacturers is that the mass production is it wrought with error, right? And so it sounds to me there's so much
yeah,
precision here that's why it's best custom, right?
yeah, it's got to be done right. And you can hide a lot of mistakes, but if you're doing it yourself and you can see inside the tubing and it's got to be clean and no oxidation, it's just got to be right. You can't fake it. It's just got to be done right, and I like that. I
yeah, well,
remember I remember when we made the grease guard bearing system that make your bearings last forever. I remember uh, we licensed it to Suntory. They did really well with it, and it was very popular in countries like England when there was a lot of mud, dirt, and rain every day. But I remember Shinpei Okajima. He was the head engineer for Shimano, and just an absolutely wonderful, bright man. And he always, gave us an audience. I really respected him, and he was always, listening to our ideas and stuff. And he looked at the grease guard system. He says, this is really nice, but why do you want it to last forever? And we said, well, we just want it to last forever. We want people to be able to take care of me. He goes, that's not a very good business plan. Don't you want to sell him a new product? I'm like, no, I want it to last forever. I was so naive, but it's
uh,
just the way I am. I want the bike to last forever. And, it's just, yeah, it's kind of a built-in flaw of mine.
well,
Not a very good
When,
businessman.
getting to understand
when
how
did you
you grew
know?
up and building everything, it's like it's not a surprise that you ended up in titanium, right? One of the tougher materials to
Yeah.
work with, certainly very tough to weld, the heat affected zone from the welding. How do you address that specifically? Because that's something that's plagued the technology of titanium in the early days, at least.
Well, and I've tried every different way of welding it, but I make my own lenses, my own welding lenses. I
Mhm.
have really good purging techniques, and I'm real careful with my heat. And you have to there's other things I do too that I'm not going to say, but there are things that I do that to control the heat and to maintain a component that's not affected by the distortion of the welding. So I have a lot of things, and they're all hard earned. They're and I usually share them with people that are interested because you still got to practice and do all that. But it takes. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. I just made a lot more mistakes. And so I have that experience of when I first started welding titanium, I remember getting a box of scrap titanium and I welded it for at least a year or two before I ever made a bike out of it. And my neck was so stiff. I was so tense and stressed out trying to do it right that I had a crick in my neck. I had to spend about a year getting out because I couldn't relax. It's intense.
Yeah.
And you can't make a movement. You've got to have still air and all that, but you can do a really good job if you purge properly. And you have to learn all these things like convection and vortexes and, all the things that happen when you're moving argon and you're heating something and you're drawing cooler up from the bottom to the top. I mean, there's just a lot of things you got to pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And when you're doing a
So
custom
with
build, man, we're talking right on top of each other for some reason today.
well, this is good shit. I'm
Go ahead, Dave.
I got so many questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well,
Well,
go.
I'm just curious with that kind of perfection and that kind of detail, let's just say, how many, maybe you can't share this, but how many bikes can you actually do in a given time period? Like how many bikes can you produce in a year with that level of detail?
Okay, well, I work alone. When I was making steel bikes with one helper, the most I ever made was 300 a year.
Wow.
And that's just me and one helper. And I do all the welding. And I could probably do maybe 100 titanium bikes, but the honest truth now is I'm doing custom now, and they're all super complicated, and everybody's got different needs and concerns. And then there's the emails and communication. And I'm lucky if I can do 30 bikes or 40 bikes a year right now. But I'm not just doing bikes. I'm making 100 forks and 100 handlebars and 300 seat posts and stems, and I'm developing new products. And so I'm kind of spread out, and I'm still welding as much as I was when I was making 300 bikes, but it's not all focused on bikes. And so
Got it.
yeah, it's a tough one. I'm trying to find that balance in my life, you guys, and I haven't quite reached it. But I just developed a whole new titanium fork that I've spent a year and a half on. Actually, I've spent more time than that, but on this particular design, I spent about a year and a half on it. It's almost ready to go. It's really neat, and it's it'll be a beautiful design. So my mind, I get caught up in doing that, which you're making prototypes and I did this one project. My older son Daniel, who's a mechanical engineer, has been such a great help to me. He's working for he's a mechanical engineer, and he got scalped from me from a big company. So I wish he was here, but he would do things like, I did this really rough prototype, and he says, well, Dad, just give me the drawing. And I go, well, so I give him a pencil drawing. Well, he puts it on SolidWorks. Okay. I mean, I can hardly do a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And he puts it on SolidWorks and says, Dad, I'm just going to send this out for somebody to print it up. And he literally sent it out on a Friday, and it was back like on Tuesday, and from some guy in his garage with a little 3D printer. And we were just doing this for the concept, to see how it all fit together and looked.
Yeah.
He was back to me on Tuesday for like $18. And I'm like, holy climate, I would have never figured that out. But
Right.
what I'm saying, there's just so many tools available. But and right now I'm developing a lot of products, not just bicycle stuff, but life-saving stuff. And I draw everything on a scrunchy little piece of paper with my pencil. And I've been really fortunate to have a couple of people in my life that are really good at CAD and designing, and I'll just snap a picture of it. And while I'm even talking to them, they're they're doing this on it. They're speaking a whole nother language. It's amazing. I mean, people say, "Oh, what CAD system do you use?" Like, it's a lifetime to learn how to use those things. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to dedicate your life to learning SolidWorks to make it a tool that you're efficient at. And I mean, if I got involved in that, I would just disappear into a black hole and I wouldn't get anything else done. It just takes so long to learn those things. And so I've been very fortunate to have some help like that. And with this fork design, I've been very fortunate. Like, the guy says, "Yeah, your pencil drawing's great. I didn't have an idea what the concept." And I'll just go like, "No, you got to do it like this." And I just scribble it out. And he goes, "Oh, okay." And literally, it's amazing to have good people to work with. It's sort of I mean, you get more than twice as much done. It's like, it's just a wonderful way to work. That's how I worked with Charlie. And that's how I work with my friend Shane with the Sea Hero. We blab on the phone. We're talking about things and I start writing things down and, "Oh, that's not what I mean." And I mean, I could tell you some funny stories about my stick drawings or like, sometimes you just bust up laughing like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not even a good cartoonist, but we
Yeah.
get it done."
Right. Well, you bring something to the table that maybe they don't have, right? They have the practical knowledge of how to utilize this tool, but you have the ideas and the design kind of components that you're bringing to the table, right?
Well,
It took a
that's why
lifetime.
it's important for people. Yeah, that's why people work together. It's um like my relationship with Charlie Cunningham. Charlie is just brilliant, and he puts something together, and it's kind of like and then I look at it and go, "Well, Charlie, that's good, but that's gonna be super hard to make. Let's make it like this," or maybe that's ugly. We got to clean it up. I mean, his function is all there, but and I think that's what's the beauty of collaborating with people that have the same passion is you're constantly helping each other up. You can't do it all by yourself. You just can't.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can, but you just be so monofocused that everything else just goes by you. It's good to interact with really creative people.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
so Mike, I think it's fair to say that this is our first podcast. We have a mad scientist on our hands. This is
All right. So let's get an idea on let's say someone is, I got a couple of questions for you. It's wrapped around the same idea though. So someone's interested in getting a custom titanium Steve Potts bicycle. And they have their own ideas about geometry. So they come with you with some wackadoo geometry that you've got to rejig, configure. What is the expected time frame for a customer to receive a product like that? And then for you, how long from like the fastest titanium custom frame build to the longest custom titanium frame build? If you can kind of share all that kind of wrapped up.
Oh, well, that's a really complex question. I'll tell you how it works in my brain is generally, if people come to me with really wacky ideas, geometry wise, what I do is I go through a little process with them. I ask them what they're writing, and I have a form that I give them where they tell me what they're writing, and then I have to get an idea of their physical abilities, their fitness levels, the type of rides they go on, if they have any like sore necks, broken wrists, whatever. And I got to put that all in account. And what I do is I can't talk anybody into anything. And if it's really not sound, I won't do it. But generally what I do, I go through a whole process to where I help them understand what each thing does. People say, "Well, I got to have a bike that has this, it's got to have this measurement." Well, that measurement affects every single other measurement on the board. So what I try to do is I just try to talk them through it and then explain things, and they generally come around. But one of the hardest things for me to do, and I'm telling people now, I'm not taking custom orders until next year because I need to find that balance and get caught up. But part of what happens, my toughest builds is when the customer's not certain or can't make a decision on something.
Yeah.
And they say, "Well, we'll just leave it up to you." Well, that puts me into a stall. And it took me a long time to figure out why am I not doing that? It's because there's a lot of uncertainty. The last thing you want to do is build a bike for somebody to go, "Well, I'm not really happy." And that I'm sure it's happened, but it's very rare. But what I'm getting at is if there's uncertainty and people don't have an understanding, um, then it makes it difficult. But when somebody comes in, I measure them up and I can see what they're doing, and it's sound geometry and sound dialogue. I get the bike done rather quickly, but it's the uncertainty, and I have it's a challenge. And let's face it, creative bike building types are not great organizers, not great business people, and we like to build everything because we like to build things, and it's kind of a downfall. I'm just getting to the part of my life where I'm realizing how unorganized and inefficient I am, and organizing all those things to make it work. And there's certainly people out there that are much better at business than I am, and they're really focused. They're focused on a certain product, and they're going to do it their way, and they're not going to deviate to make any changes, or they're really interested in money or numbers. And that's just not me. I'm a little bit on the creative side, and I need to be better in my organizational skills and all of that. It's so that it's a learning process.
Yeah.
I'm what do they say? Youth is wasted on the young. It's, if I could learn these things better, I would be a much better at everything. It's a hard balance. I get really sucked in. Like I'll come into my shop, and my happiest moments are going full force, actually making something. The music's on and I'm focused, and there's a satisfaction in making something and having it tangible in front of you. And I mean, I hate emails. There's so many things that are hard. Ordering parts, well, it's a nightmare, especially in the last couple of years. Recently, I've just kind of entered into a relationship with a really wonderful bike shop up north. And that's what he does. He finds the parts. He's got to go to 7 different distributors, and he knows all the latest components. That's a whole nother thing. It's the standards change every 5 minutes. And for a bike builder, you've got to change your tooling. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. You've got to educate yourself on the new dropout, the new bottom bracket standard, the new spindle standard, the new everything. It's just Q factors change, this chain lines, now we've got, free wheels that are $600 and they look like, it's just amazing. Like, everything has changed. It's a constant battle to keep up and be, and you have to sort out what's worth investing in. Like, do we need a new standard? Didn't the old one work just fine? But it's the way the world goes, and you kind of got to pay attention. So a lot of your time gets sucked up trying to learn about these things and educate yourself so you can be, so you can make a good product.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Yeah, I bet. I could just what you were describing right there. That's something I hadn't really thought about. And there's not really like any blast that goes out to manufacturers or anything about, hey, SRAM's developed this new technology, and here's what you need to do as a frame builder to make your frames compatible with this. You just have to figure that out on your own for the most part. Or
if you've ever looked through a Shimano technical book, it's
Jesus,
it's 3 inches thick. There's 5,000 of each SKU, and you got to learn what's compatible with what, and it's an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And it's all good. I'm not saying it's bad. It is, but you've got to be an information junkie to keep up. And it's like, it's horrific. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, now you did a brilliant job of not answering my question. So,
what was it? Okay.
So the customer.
Let me.
Yeah.
It's a trade secret, Mike. It's a trade secret.
I'm going to cut to the chase. If I wanted to come into my shop, and it's never quite this easy, I could sit down and crank out a bike, like start to finish in a week. I can make a steel bike in 8 hours, but there's all, there's the paint, there's this, there's that, there's the finish. And then some bikes might take 2 years. Honestly, it's just a complete all over the roadmap. And I'm sorry I didn't answer that question. I kind of got lost there, but
that's good.
No.
If I know what I'm doing, if they said, Steve, the world needs your bike this week, I'll do it. But the thing is you've got 50 people that want that. And so you're trying to keep everything in line as they come, but life's just not that simple. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got this and that, and
Well, like you said, the
know,
uncertainty with a
it,
lot of custom people,
yeah,
that's you can see where that could just be a rabbit hole where you could spend a year with somebody just bouncing back and forth on email about this or that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I could see where you don't
So
want to be in the business of convincing somebody, because
No, no,
it's like you kind of have to sort it out as a client
yeah,
what it is you want. And then you as a builder, like you say, you have the right to say, look, I'm not going to do this. This isn't right. But if you were to convince somebody like, hey, this is the proper thing you should be doing here, and let's work on the
yeah,
seat angle here, and then they get the thing and then they're not happy with it, it's like, well, this guy railroaded my whole design. And you could
yeah.
it's a tricky
It
balance to
is.
kind of keep, I bet.
Yeah,
let,
it's very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
so I have two questions, man. So we're talking custom. So is it like an 80-20 rule? Like there's 80% of the bike is going to be kind of standard stuff and 20% is
Um,
for the
no,
individual?
no, it's not actually. Every bike I do is a brand new drawing. There's no template. Um,
Okay.
and so what I do, I mainly, and remember, I'm trying to wean myself off of this so I can, it's not like I've got, it's not like I'm at the beginning of my life at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to balance that. And I do want to make really good products for people. But what happens is there's certain things, like there's all these new fads. There's the long front ends, and short stems, and which is all good if you're running a full suspension bike and you're blasting down hills. The reality is, if you went on your best ride, only 10% of that's going to be a downhill where you go, wow, that was awesome.
Yep.
The rest of the ride, you've got to climb, you've got to steer, you've got to navigate, you've got everything to consider. So I've always kind of steered away from these like fads. So certain geometries work really well over the years. And you kind of want to stick to the basics, the weight bias and wheelbases and angles and what they do and your rider trail and your everything. And there's sort of an area that is very reliable. Now, remember, I'm a cross country guy, so I have built downhill bikes and all that stuff, but I'm kind of you want to go touring, you want to go mountain biking, you want a bike that just feels like it fits you and it's comfortable. That's what I do. So you got to be, all the other stuff. There's all these extremes that go out. You've got free ride and this and downhill, and now you got gravel bikes now are really 29ers. It's like, okay, let's back it up a little bit, and so because everybody wants their bike to be future proof and do everything. So I try to reel it down. I go, what are you really going to use your bike for? So what is your regular, what do you do every day? What do you do on the weekend? Are you like, how do you use your bike? And when it comes down to it, gets pretty basic and simple because people say, oh, can you put disc on? Can you put a rim brake on too, just for future proof? And then I want to have this brake standard and that brake standard. And there might be a bigger spindle. So let's go with this spot. It's like, oh my gosh, pick one and go.
Yeah.
Right.
And can you build me a bike that's suspension corrected and with a fork that's 20 inches long? And I go, no, you're never going to even change the fork. Once you get the bike, you're going to ride it and you're going to be, what I'm getting at is mentally people have this, I wanted to do everything all the time great, and you can't, it's a compromise. So I
Right.
say, let's pick a rigid bike, or if you want a suspension bike, I'll make you one, but you're not going to go back and forth because there's going to be a major compromise in the geometry and the performance and reliability of each component. Whether it's a 20-inch rigid fork, which I won't do, it's like, let's make your bike do really good at what you want it to do and what it's going to be used for. So that's a challenge too. There's, and I try to stay away from that. I feel like I've been very fortunate to have really wonderful customers, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's a roller coaster ride.
I think it's human nature because there is always like this idea of one bike to slay them all, right?
It's the
But
unicorn.
yeah, but the reality is, I'm a bike rep. So I got, I got a road bike. I've got a couple different road bikes. I've got a gravel bike. I've got a mountain bike. I've got this whole quiver, as they say.
Yeah.
But, and you like with a gravel bike, it kind of got into this thing where it was like, one bike to slay them all kind of mentality. And
Yeah.
and I have a awesome gravel bike that I love, but then you hop on your road bike and realize the whole notion of one bike to slay them all is
Oh
completely
yeah.
ridiculous. If you love cycling, you love riding your bike, why, to your point, make this bike that's a compromise of all
Yeah.
the things that you love? Like, you have your dedicated bikes for what it is you're going to
Yeah.
do, because
It-
that's where you have the best experience.
Well,
I
yeah.
use this, I use this analogy all the time, right? Cause I'm constantly under like, hey, I have a gravel bike and now I want to get a cyclocross bike. And, my wife will say, and understands bikes, but she's like, why do you need a different bike? And she comes from a golfing family. I said, why does your brother have 13 clubs in his bag? Right? They all serve a different
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, they
It never
do.
gets me I think it's a good analogy. It never gets me a new bike, but I think
Do
it's
you
a
have
great
thir-
analogy.
do you have 13 new bikes now?
I know. I'm just
So,
counting them up right now. 1, 2,
yeah.
3, 4, 5,
Okay,
6.
so this is the part that I've always resisted, is the hype. Like
Yeah.
right now, I ride my motorcycle. I have two motorcycles, but and I have a racing background, but I like to do adventure riding where I can put my camping gear on, my fly rod. I even took my dog on every single trip I went on, and
Yeah.
my little
Nice.
cowboy. And
Awesome.
and so everybody's looking for the unicorn, like, oh, this is the best bike for everything. You've got guys buying $25,000 BMW 1290s, and they, I mean, you're all over the map. It's
Mhm.
like you go from a single cylinder KTM 690 or a Husqvarna 701 or a Tenere 700 or Aprilia 660, or I mean, it's like everybody's looking for the unicorn, and it does not exist. And the motorcycles that I have, I don't want to ride anybody. I'm happy. I know what they do and I'm satisfied. I don't need any more. I don't need any electronics. I don't need lane control, skid controlled, rain, wet. I just ride the thing. And
Yep.
everything's gotten so complicated. It's like,
Yeah.
just keep it simple.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
Well,
it's just
Hey,
overkill.
question for
Yeah.
you.
yeah.
Question for you. What I want to backtrack just slightly. So what's the kind of strangest request? And when you ask that question, like, what are you going to use this for? Has there any been like outlier thing, like, oh my God, I've never seen this before? Or is it just, no, I'm just doing
Um,
gravel, or just, has there been any kind of strange requests?
no, not really. They've been pretty normal. I had somebody ask me to put pink elephants on their bike in the paint job. I was pretty good at paint, and I thought, okay, well, can I do pink elephants or whatever it was? I can't remember, but
Yeah.
sometimes
Sounds like you
you
didn't
get.
do it.
I did. No, I did do it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did. I figured it out, and I did it. But I thought, God, this is not a good way to spend your time. I got early on. My son Daniel, who was really helpful, by the way, who actually was the one that organized my ordering system. Without him, I'd be in such trouble right now.
Wow.
To go back, I used to draw so many bikes. I've made over 6,000 bikes, and they were all in butcher paper because drafting vellum is, non-shrinkable and very expensive. But when somebody wants to change, and they, you got to rip up the drawing and start over. And so it took me years to figure out how to do bike CAD. But back to my son kind of made this really cool electric paintbrush that he learned how to anodize the titanium. So we
Oh,
got
wow.
into anodizing the person's name on the bike and this and that. And then the request became kind of, and just so you know, there's guys out there that do just an amazing job with that. Like Firefly does a beautiful job, and kind of everybody's gotten, and it's cool and it's personal.
Yeah.
But there became a point where we got into this, and Daniel said to me, he says, Dad, this just takes a lot of time. He says, you got to make up your mind if we're going to do artwork or if you're going to make a solid, sturdy bike that's functional, and put your time in that. And
Right.
I'll still do it on request, but it's like,
Yeah.
I thought I need to focus on the important stuff. I got to make them a nice bike that fits them and it's welded, structurally sound, and it fits them and all that. So you have so much time. So you want to be careful to get away from the bells and whistles, and
Yeah.
I got a really nice compliment from Valentino Campanolo. I won a little award. It was third place, but it was really an honor. And he looked at me and he said, "Your bike was my favorite." He says, "It's no more and no less than the most functional, beautiful bike." And it was really heartwarming to hear that. It wasn't, there was no paint on it. It was just simple and clean. And that's sort of been my trademark. It's just got to be clean, and the welds have to be structurally sound. And I don't care if it's purple, blue, or pink elephants. It's just got to be straight. I mean,
Yeah.
yes,
I,
So what about this current trend
Steve,
of hiding all the cables? Where
What's
are you
that?
at? What about this current trend of hiding all the cables? Where are you at
Well,
with that?
Well, I tell people, I mean, certain cables, I mean, the dropper one's pretty easy one to do because they have one that goes in the C tube. But hiding cables is expensive. It's a total pain in the ass for maintenance.
Yep.
It's hard on the cables because you got to make some tight turns that impede the performance of the cable. If you're doing hydraulic hidden cables, that's really a nightmare as far as you fishing a cable through and then repurging it and doing all that. I get it. It's clean and all, but it's a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be simple. And part of the simplicity is when you're out somewhere and something breaks, you can fix it. I truly believe that. It's like, don't make it complicated. Oh my God, just keep it simple. And you
Yeah.
can see it.
Yeah.
It's visually in your face. If the cable's dirty, you can see it. If it's frayed or broken, you can fix it. And it's a simple fix. I don't like making things more complicated.
Yeah.
I'm kind of that way.
Yeah.
Life is tough enough without making it more complicated.
Yeah. Well said. All right. Well, Steve, it has been an honor having you on the podcast. I feel like I kind of need to wrap it up here, but Dave, do you have anything that you want to cover before we get out
No,
of here?
I'm well, first of all, I need to thank you because you just gave me, I'm the guy that has to market these things, and you just gave me my good sound bite, so I don't have to search too much, right? So, which is great. But we're going to hang up right now if that's appropriate for Zoom, and I will go through the rest of my day frustrated because there are so many other questions and so many other stuff that we didn't even touch on. So it's just been fascinating
Oh, I know.
honestly.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
I would just say for everybody, I'd say for people just to keep moving, go outdoors, get your good walk in and your good bike ride in, and just stay healthy.
Yes.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Right
and
on.
Get in the mountains if it's at all possible. Just get yourself to the mountains. It's truly remarkable.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. And so now you have this new product that you've been working on, this fork. When might we expect to see that launched?
Probably early spring. And I also have a couple other things. I'm just not going to say anything about it, but but that one I'm really excited about it, and it's really close. So it's I'm hoping early spring.
Okay. And actually, another thing I'm thinking of, are you going to be involved with the Handmade Bicycle Show? I know that you've been involved in the past, and
Well, yeah, but I'm not sure if it's still happening. I'm kind of waiting. I mean, I'm paid up to. Yeah, the North American hand-built bike show has been off the last 3 years, and I'm hoping it will recover. I mean, I paid for my last booth that we didn't get to go to, so
wow.
I'm kind of looking forward to it. We'll see what happens. It's going to play out the way it does, and if it does happen, I'll go. And I do that mainly just to connect with all my buddies, and it's just fun it's a fun, good energy thing. And it's a good time, good people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I didn't realize that they had shuttered that thing. Yeah.
Well, and hopefully it comes back. We'll see. I haven't heard any news lately, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I never went to it, but I always loved the footage that came from it. There's so much innovation and cool products. Yeah. It's
No, it's worth seeing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Good group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much. If someone's interested in finding out more about Steve Potts Custom Bikes, can you let them know what's the best way to get a hold of you? Check it out.
Well, I got a website, Steve Potts Bicycles, and it's kind of, it doesn't have a lot of things on it that I'm making, but I just haven't had the time to put them on. And then I have an Instagram, Steve Potts Bicycles. It's just simple, and it's just purely bicycle stuff and some shop photos and welding thing. It's kind of fun, and that's a good way to do it. And well, that's kind of it. I'm kind of low key, but
Yeah.
it's just type in Steve Potts and you'll find me somewhere.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on. And for those of you listeners out there, we appreciate you. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can give us a 5-star review. That really helps us, even some feedback. We love it. If you're interested in subscribing, cyclesports.buzzsprout. I did that last week too. cyclejerkspodcast.buzzsprout.com. Hit the subscribe button. And yeah, we appreciate you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
And thanks, you guys.
Peace.